Dan Hurley. Wow. Can everyone give him a round of applause, please? Great job to Dan Hurley for winning another national championship in college basketball. This is Sports Guy Talking that you guys are watching and listening to. I am Dustin Tran, your host, as I am here today to talk about UConn dominating Purdue in the March Madness National Championship game by the score of 75-60. UConn's defense suffocated Purdue's offense all night long as the old saying of defense wins championships came into full effect. UConn guard Tristen Newton led the way in scoring for his team as he had 20 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds. Before I say anything else though, I want to present you guys with the topic question. So here it is. What is your reaction to UConn dominating Purdue by the score of 75-60? Honestly, I am not surprised whatsoever. I was watching this game last night in my family room, and I was thinking about okay, UConn is going to win this game by 12 points. Well, they ended up winning this game by 15 points. And here's the crazy thing too. If Purdue had just knocked out one more three-pointer in this ball game, I would have been right on the dot with my score prediction, because I said UConn would win this game by 12 points and that this game would be initially close in the first half, but that UConn will ultimately pull away in the second half. That's exactly what happened. I said that Purdue needed Zach Edey to play an incredible game, and they needed Braden Smith to play out of his mind in the national championship game. Well, Zach Edey definitely played out of his mind, because Zach Edey scored 37 points in the national championship game. In fact, Zach Edey did everything that he could to make this game somewhat competitive for Purdue, because as far as I'm concerned with the other Purdue players, they sucked in that national championship game. They stunk up the joint and they played horrible basketball. Look, when your team combines to score for 23 points when you remove 37 points away from Zach Edey, that tells me that the team crapped the bed in the national championship game. I did not think Braden Smith played a good game whatsoever. I said Braden Smith was the X factor for Purdue in order to keep this game competitive. Well, Braden Smith shot 4 of 12 from the field. He only scored 12 points, and he was really inefficient from the field when he actually was playing basketball. He did get 8 assists, so good for Braden Smith in that regard. But Zach Edey was by far the best player for Purdue. Zach Edey was the guy that even made this game competitive in the first place. If it wasn't for Zach Edey, this game would have been a blowout a long time ago. Look, anytime your center puts up 37 points while getting 10 rebounds and you get blown out by 15 points in a national championship game, that tells me that the rest of the roster around you isn't very good whatsoever. I didn't think Purdue played a good game outside of Zach Edey. I thought defensively they didn't get enough stops on that floor, and even if they did get enough stops, I don't think their offense was good enough to even win that game, because outside of Zach Edey, it's not like anybody else was contributing anything offensively on the floor. You look at how Purdue's bench, they only produced 2 points off the bench. If your bench is only producing 2 points in a national championship game, you are not going to win that game 10 times out of 10. I don't care who you are at any given time. If your bench can't produce, you can't keep games competitive. And when you can't keep games competitive, you can't win basketball games more often than not. And then, of course, for UConn, I thought they were really well-rounded. They continued their trend of greatness during the March Madness tournament, and obviously Tristen Newton played a really good basketball game. I thought that he played efficient basketball. I thought he did what he could when he had the basketball in his hands. I thought that Tristen Newton made a lot of good reads with the basketball in his hands. I thought he shot the basketball pretty effectively. I thought he did a good job getting to the free throw line. You look at how Tristen Newton, he had 20 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. Anytime you got a point guard that's playing that good, that tells me that the rest of the team is going to be playing good basketball. And of course, you look at Donovan Klingman. I thought that UConn needed to slow down Zach Edey in order to dominate in the national championship game. Well, that didn't even matter, because even though Zach Edey got 37 points, guess what? They shut everybody else down. So it didn't even really matter as far as what Donovan Klingman did. As long as you didn't get posterized, you were basically good. And guess what happened? Donovan Klingman did his job somewhat on the defensive end of the floor. And of course, you look at the other role players for UConn. They might not have a superstar on that team, but that's okay, because they've got a great supporting cast around each other, and obviously they're pretty top heavy roster wise in their starting five. I know their bench isn't incredible or anything like that, but their bench was much better than Purdue's, because UConn's bench managed to score 13 points in the national championship game, which is obviously more than 2 points. So obviously UConn, they did a pretty good job doing what they were supposed to do off the bench. And of course, you look at how they had multiple guys scoring in double figures. You look at how Stephon Castle did a pretty good job spacing the floor and taking advantage of his opportunities when he had the chance to do so. You look at that Spencer kid, he played really efficient basketball as well. Cam Spencer did what he was supposed to do as far as scoring the basketball in his hands and getting all the hustle rebounds. I thought he did a great job doing what he was supposed to do. And let me give the credit to Dan Hurley where credit is due, man, because as far as what Dan Hurley did, it's really incredible as to what he has built at UConn. You look at how UConn, now they are back-to-back national champions, and they couldn't have done that without the recruiting and coaching of Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley is the best coach in college basketball right now. When you think about legendary coaches in college basketball, who do you think of? You think about Coach Cal, or at least in the past you used to think about Coach Cal. You thought about Coach K, and you thought about Coach Roy Williams, and of course you thought about Coach Bill Self. And obviously some of those guys have retired while other guys have fallen off the map in terms of relevancy. And Dan Hurley has decided to take advantage of that opportunity in order to boost up his own stock. And now you look at how Dan Hurley is now one of the biggest stars in all of college basketball, even though he's not a player. He's actually a head coach. But Dan Hurley has managed to squeeze out 2 national championships with this UConn team. And I thought this run was far more impressive than last season. I think that they are the best champion in the last 10 years, and I say that because of the dominance that UConn displayed throughout the national championship game. I thought Dan Hurley did a great job getting his guys ready to play basketball more often than not, and not only did he motivate those guys to win, he motivated those guys to blow out their opponents. In March Madness, what do you think about? You think about buzzer beater shots, and you think about how every game is supposed to be thrilling, but that was not the case for UConn this year at all. UConn didn't have any dramatic games at all this year, and it wasn't just UConn that dominated games all the time. It was just throughout the tournament, throughout March Madness. You look at how there were a lot of blowouts in those games. As a fan, I hated seeing blowouts in March Madness, but we all know that UConn was the best team all year long. When I saw UNC lose that game to Alabama, I thought, oh my goodness, UConn is definitely going to win the title. We might as well hit the fast forward button because we all know UConn is going to win the national championship. They were just on another level this year. Obviously, you look at the run last year, it was pretty impressive as well. Although they weren't necessarily a great regular season team, they just figured it out in the March Madness tournament. That's how they ended up winning the national championship last year. Now you look at them this year, now they're doing really good again. And obviously, they had a dominant regular season. They had a dominant postseason. They had a dominant run all year long, and Dan Hurley is a major reason as to why that happened. Look, if Kentucky ends up getting Dan Hurley next season as their head coach to replace Coach Cal, I would not be surprised if that happened, because right now Dan Hurley has got to be the hottest name in coaching sports right now, because Dan Hurley has managed to coach UConn to back-to-back national championships, and you didn't even think of UConn as a blue blood program prior to Dan Hurley getting hired by UConn. But guess what? UConn has now entered blue blood status because they've won 6 national championships since 1999. And of course, they've won back-to-back national championships, something that has not been done in college basketball since Florida did it in 2006 and 2007. Look, there's only been 4 coaches in the last 60 years that have won back-to-back national championships. They are Billy Donovan, Coach K, and John Wooden. Anytime you're in a company with those 3 guys, you're in rarefied air, and obviously Dan Hurley accomplished that. We have to talk about Dan Hurley as an all-time great college basketball coach, because you look at how UConn was not necessarily a great program when Dan Hurley walked into that situation, but it didn't even matter because Dan Hurley has managed to rebuild this UConn team into national champions not once but twice. Anytime you do that in college basketball, that's really impressive. The March Madness tournament is supposed to be known as the tournament of upsets, but UConn has managed to avoid getting upsetted during March Madness in back-to-back years. That tells me that they are well coached and well prepared, and that they do what they are supposed to do on the basketball court at all times, and that they just focus on one game at a time. When you have a mentality of that as a team overall, you're going to win basketball games more often than not. as far as the real reason why Dan Hurley won a national championship at UConn, it's pretty simple. It's because he prepared himself really well and he gave great advice to his players in terms of knowing what you need to prepare for in big time games. And obviously the results speak for themselves. I can't be surprised that UConn dominated Purdue because we all knew that UConn was the better team on paper. Yeah, they might not have had the best player on the floor, but guess what? When you've got a really good starting five, it's going to be really hard to beat. And I don't care who the opponent has as their other starting five, because even though they might have one great player, they don't have multiple good players. And when you don't have multiple good players, guess what? You're not going to win the game more often than not. And UConn understood that. They understood that, hey, they don't necessarily need to get superstars, but we need to get a starting five that has really good chemistry and that they are somewhat star level players. And that's exactly what they are, because they did a great job playing team basketball together. So that is why I was very impressed, although certainly not surprised in terms of the dominance UConn displayed against Purdue as they won by the score of 75-60. Remember, go ahead and subscribe to Sports Guy Talking, like the video, and please comment down below. If you guys do that, I may shout you guys out in my Instagram story every Monday. That will be for the @Dustin-Tran Instagram account. Make sure to follow me on Instagram @Dustin-Tran and @Sports Guy Talking. Also, go follow me on Twitter @Dustin-Tran. Again, go ahead and do those things that I just told you guys to go do. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the content that was just produced. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed that video. Want more Sports Guy Talking, the home of great sports content? Make sure you click that subscribe button to get the latest from Sports Guy Talking. Go ahead and like the video, comment down below, check the description box on the video in order to follow my Instagram and Twitter. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the YouTube channel Sports Guy Talking.